For hundreds of years, a 200 square mile region in southeastern Massachusetts has been home to violence and the paranormal. The Bridgewater Triangle has seen war, cryptids, UFO encounters, hauntings, and even ritual murders. Today we find out what makes this place special and why some claim the region is cursed. There are countless tangible artifacts from the Bridgewater Triangle that you can see for yourself to this day. Some of these are thought to be the reason for all the strange things that happen in the area. The first known reference to Dighton Rock dates back to 1680 when a man named John Danforth saw a large rock peeking above the waterline with strange carvings and markings. Perplexed and sensing this rock held some significance, he decided to sketch out what he could see. His original drawing is still in possession of the British Museum. Danforth considered the possibilities and examined his sketch and came to the conclusion that given the rock's position at the mouth of the Taunton River with inscriptions facing the sea, that it was the work of Native Americans of the area. John Danforth is far from the only scholar to attempt to decipher the carvings on Dighton Rock. From the Phoenicians to Vikings to Portuguese or Chinese explorers, and of course aliens, there's no shortage of theories, but none have proven to be conclusive. Today you can see them for yourself if you visit the Dighton Rock State Park, as the stone was moved into a small museum during the construction of a dam in 1963. Sometime in the 1800s, a dynamite blast created what became known as Profile Rock. This quickly became an important landmark for the Wampanoag people. To them it resembled their leader, Massasoit, who was incredibly successful at maintaining a peaceful relationship with the English settlers during his lifetime. Upon his death, his son Philip took his place in power. Philip would go to Profile Rock to meditate and some believe attempt to connect to his father. Before his eventual death during King Philip's War, he would also use the site to meet with his general, Anawan. In 2001, a climber was scaling the rock. He claims that when he got near the top, the air began to feel warm and humid. He looked up to see a human shape with dark skin and no hair looking down at him. The figure reached down as if to offer to help him up. The climber looked down to his feet to make sure he was secure, but when he looked up, it had vanished. Until the site's recent destruction, there were sightings of a figure sitting on top of the rock, legs crossed and arms outstretched in a prayer-like position. Just 2 weeks after the death of King Philip, his general Anawan was captured at what became his namesake, Anawan Rock. The colonists promised to spare his life in return for his peaceful surrender, but he was ultimately executed. In his possession was an artifact called the Wampum Belt, which through beadwork told the history of the Wampanoag tribe. The location of the belt is lost to time, but some think it could be in the possession of the British Museum, or that it was broken up and divided as spoils of war. The strange happenings, paranormal encounters, and violence that have since occurred in the Bridgewater Triangle are now sometimes blamed on a curse caused by the loss of the belt. The curse can only be lifted if the belt is returned to the place it belongs. UFOs have been seen in the skies over the Bridgewater Triangle for hundreds of years. In fact, what is often referred to as the very first documented UFO sighting in history occurred there. Around 10 a.m. on May 10, 1760, a sphere of fire so bright that it was able to cast shadows was observed flying over New England, including directly over Bridgewater. On Halloween night, 1908, two undertakers were driving their carriage through the center of town just after 3 a.m. Suddenly, they saw a bright light about 3 feet in diameter, brighter than any lantern they were used to seeing. They, along with others, watched it for nearly an hour. Sometimes it would hover, other times it would move quickly in straight lines. The encounter was highly documented in local newspapers, which led some to theorize that they had only seen a hot air balloon. But this was countered by the fact that all known balloons in the state were accounted for at the time. One of the undertakers went on to say, "I claim that a hot air balloon could not move in a circle or perpendicular, as this one did. It moved up and down, seemingly at the will of some individual. Other small sightings include 2 large UFOs being seen landing in Taunton near Route 44 in 1976. In 1991, a green disc was seen moving slowly and silently just off the ground, illuminating everything near it. 6 years later, in 1997, a police officer working the graveyard shift saw a triangular craft with white and red lights. The following year, another UFO with white and red lights was seen over Assawamsett Pond, allegedly splitting into 2 and flying at high speeds before joining back into one object. Military aircraft were reported in the area soon after. For an area as old and with as much history as New England, it should come as no surprise that reports of hauntings are widespread. The Bridgewater Triangle is certainly no exception. At Bridgewater State University, which was founded in 1840, there are many stories of ghosts around the campus. In Woodward Hall, people sometimes hear a woman running down the hallways yelling "fire." Legend says it's a woman who started and died in a fire that burned down the original Woodward Hall in 1924, but official documents have no records of anyone dying in the fire. Tillinghast Hall is haunted by a former headmistress who died after falling to the ground from the building's roof. An apparition that the students call George can be seen in the auditorium playing various instruments late at night. In Shea Durgan Hall, a woman can be heard choking in room 208, supposedly at the hands of a jealous and vengeful boyfriend. This hall also experiences poltergeist-like activity with lights flickering on and off, objects being moved from where they were left, and doors loudly being banged on. The former Hornbine School is also the site of spectral incidents. Built in 1862 and used until 1937, visitors today sometimes see a woman wearing a 19th century dress, as well as young children within the locked building. Those who see them say they appear to be repeating the same routine over and over as if they are stuck in a loop. Voices are also heard resonating from within the small building when witnesses are sure there is no one inside. The now abandoned Taunton State Hospital shares a similar story to other mental institutions of the time from around the country. Built in 1854, the hospital operated for 121 years. The long years were not peaceful, though. Famously, the grounds were home to 2 well-known serial killers. Anthony Santo committed 3 murders over 3 months, his 2 cousins and another young girl. Jane Toppin, commonly known as Jolly Jane, confessed to 31 murders but was accused of far more. Both spent the final years of their lives at Taunton State. Sadly, though, the majority of the patients that were brought there did not belong. Veterans who sustained head injuries, those with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Tourette's, as well as women suffering from postpartum depression were admitted. Today, screams and cries for help can be heard echoing through the halls. A shadow man has also been reportedly seen lurking in dark corners and crawling along the walls. The Thunderbird is an elusive, unnaturally large bird that comes from Native American folklore. It is said to be so powerful that when it flaps its wings, it can create thunder. There are 2 famous sightings of the bird in the Bridgewater Triangle. The first was in 1988 when 2 boys came across large 3-toed footprints near Hockomock Swamp and decided to follow them. After some time, they came face to face with a massive bird-like creature that took to the skies when it saw the boys. They reported what happened to adults, but were told all they had seen was a blue heron. While the blue heron itself is very large, growing up to 4 feet tall, the boys were adamant that what they saw was the size of a man. Over 10 years before this incident, a police officer named Thomas Downey claims to have seen the same bird. He was on his way home driving past Hockomock Swamp when he saw the creature standing at the edge of the water. He said it resembled a bird, but like the boys, said it was over 6 feet tall. The bird approached his parked car for a moment before taking flight directly over the officer. He estimated the wingspan to be over 12 feet across. His story was corroborated on some level when he called for backup and other officers found large 3-toed footprints in the dirt. The Thunderbird is not the only famous cryptid to call the Bridgewater Triangle home. Bigfoot has been seen in the region countless times. In 1970, residents reported a hairy 7-foot creature running through their yards. Assuming it was just a bear, the police launched a search in the name of public safety, but were unable to find any nearby. Also in 1970, 2 police officers were parked near the Hockomock Swamp. Suddenly they felt the rear end of their cruiser lift up off the ground before slamming back down. They quickly turned their car around to get the spotlight pointed in the direction of whatever was there. The light revealed something resembling a bear but running on just 2 legs before disappearing behind a house. Again, a search was carried out, but nothing was ever found. A woman in West Bridgewater once heard a loud noise outside of her home. She looked through the window to see what it was, and there she saw a huge bipedal hairy creature eating her pumpkins. They made eye contact, causing it to run off, carrying the pumpkin with it. In the early 1980s, a man was placing trap lines in his canoe. As he paddled to his next spot, he began to feel something watching him. He decided to turn off the main waterway and into a small creek. He heard ice cracking as if something was moving closer to him. Peeking from the shadows, he saw a giant hairy creature smelling musty like a skunk. He paddled off and escaped the encounter. He said in his 30 years of experience on the swamp, he had never seen anything like that. There are numerous other cryptids that can be supposedly found in the area. There have been reports of phantom dogs that can appear and disappear seemingly at will. Another massive ghostly dog has been seen with glowing red eyes that allegedly tore the throats from 2 horses. Impossibly large black cats, turtles, and snakes have also been seen. No supernatural being is more important to the Bridgewater Triangle than this. The Pukwudgie, which translates to person of the wilderness, is a 2 to 3 foot tall being that resembles a human being but with greatly exaggerated features that has gray, sometimes glowing skin. They have powers such as poisonous arrows, the ability to create fire and appear and disappear at will. They also have, under their control, spirits of those that they have killed that appear as spheres of light similar to the will-o-wisp often found in European legends. In Wampanoag folklore, they once had a good relationship with the Pukwudgies. In their creation story, there was a giant called Mashop who created the land. The Wampanoag loved the giant, and their relationship with the Pukwudgies began to strain. They tried to help the Wampanoag people to regain their favor, but nothing would work. They became frustrated and reached their breaking point. They began to instead cause mischief and torment. Mashop came to the defense of the Wampanoag and banished the Pukwudgies. But this was only a temporary fix, as they soon returned even more vengeful. They began to kidnap children, burn homes, and lure people into the woods to kill them. One man was walking through the woods when he saw a bright orb in front of him off the trail. He tried to take a picture of it, but it vanished, reappearing further into the woods. He continued to follow it until he realized he was deep into the thick, away from the trail. He began to panic and found his way back, only to find a 2-foot-tall creature walking towards him. He took off in the other direction, looking over his shoulder to see the creature step back into the woods. There are also stories from within Freetown State Forest of a tall cliff that overlooks what was once a quarry. The Pukwudgies use these lights to lure unsuspecting people towards the edge so they can push them off to their deaths. The Freetown State Forest is not only home to most of the paranormal and supernatural sightings I've spoken of, but it is also home to very real violence carried out by human beings. In 1978, the body of a teenager named Mary Lou Arruda was found tied to a tree. Her killer was eventually sentenced to life without parole. The following year, 3 satanic cult members were convicted of murdering 2 women who they had bound together and crushed their skulls. A 3rd victim had only her skull found. Police found evidence of satanic rituals in other parts of the forest and believed the 3 victims were lured there and used as part of ritual sacrifice. There have also been mutilated animals found that were tied to satanic cults. A dirt bike rider in the 90s found a decaying carcass of a headless cow. The Freetown police said a dozen calves were butchered in the same area earlier that year. In 1983, a newborn baby boy was found abandoned just off Route 24. He unfortunately later died from exposure. The perpetrators were never identified. 4 years later, in 1987, the body of a drifter was found after being beaten, shot 3 times, and set on fire by 4 men who believed he was a police informant. The next year, a man was found dead from shotgun wounds, and the body of Elizabeth Gregory, who died in 1896, was stolen from a cemetery. Finally, in 1991, a teenager was badly beaten and stabbed during a drug deal gone bad. The perpetrators stole his boots and attempted to bury him in leaves. After 3 days, he was miraculously found clinging to life, but he went on to suffer from brain damage and frostbite, which caused him to lose both of his legs. You could draw a triangle between 3 points in most of the world and find frightening stories from both the natural and supernatural worlds. But for such a small area in southeastern Massachusetts, the Bridgewater Triangle is densely packed with tales of cryptids, ghosts, aliens, and human atrocities. Maybe it has been cursed by the loss of the wampum belt, or maybe we will find a natural explanation one day. But no matter what the cause is, the story of the Bridgewater Triangle has many more chapters yet to be written.